All right, welcome everyone to today's Google Search Central SEO Office Hours Hangout. My name is John Mueller. I'm a search advocate on the search relations team here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do are these office hours where people can jump in and ask their questions around search, and we can try to find some answers. And it looks like we have one person raising their hand. So we'll start off with some live questions, and then we'll go off and look at the submitted ones. Daniel, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I can't believe I was the first one as well after that. Mine's just a quick one, actually, and I think I know the answer, but I just wanted to double check. So if we've got internal URLs that are relative URLs, and they're pointing to the canonical, and the canonical is the absolute URL, is that fine for Google? And the reason why I ask is because in Screaming Frog, yes, in Screaming Frog, we struggle to crawl relative URLs because it has to have the domain, it has to have the protocol in there. And so we can only really crawl it if we then change the configuration to add XML sitemap. So, in the past, we've said, OK, if it's a relative URL, regardless of pointing canonical, absolute, you should make everything absolute. And I just wanted to get your idea or opinion, because I see this a lot in Shopify now. So
relative URLs are perfectly fine. So also the mix of relative and absolute URLs, that's perfectly fine. I'm kind of surprised if you can't crawl through that, because it sounds like it's more that the relative URLs might be wrong, or there might be some mistake there. But
it's mainly products, I've noticed. Yeah, it's mainly products. I've seen it a couple of times, and it might be that we just need to change the configuration, but that was something that I'd noticed. And I think it is maybe I suppose a bigger issue if the canonical was the relative URL, because then you don't know what the canonical is. But I just thought I'd just double check if it was the other way around, if there was an issue there.
Should be fine. Should be fine.
Awesome. That was it for me. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Michael.
Hi. So a couple of years ago, Google noted that when it came to ranking results, BERT would better understand and impact about 10% of searches in the US. So my question is twofold. One is, has that percentage changed for BERT? And you probably can anticipate this one. What percentage is MUM expected to better understand and impact searches?
I have no idea. So I'm pretty sure that the percentage changed since then, because everything is changing. But I don't know if we have like a fixed number that goes for BERT or that goes for MUM. MUM is, as far as I understand it, is more like a multi-purpose machine learning library anyway. So it's something that can be applied in lots of different parts of search. So it's not so much that you would like isolate it to just ranking. But rather, you might be able to use it for understanding things like on a very fine-grained level, and then that's kind of interwoven in a lot of different kinds of search results. But I don't think we have any fixed numbers.
I have to say, besides it sort of blowing my mind what MUM can do, it seemed to me like it was going to open more opportunities, actually, for different products or queries to be discovered. It seemed like it was just sort of exponentially going to blow it out what one could learn.
I don't know. We'll see. I think it's always tricky to look at the marketing around machine learning algorithms, because it's very easy to find, I don't know, very exceptional examples, but that doesn't mean that everything is as flashy as that. But I like in talking with some of the search quality folks, they're really happy with the way that these kind of machine learning models are working.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Julian.
Hey, John. Thank you for doing the office hours. I have a question about a message in the Search Console, indexed though blocked by robots.txt. So of a certain page type, we have about 20,000 valid index pages, which looks about right. And however, we're alarmed that we have a warning for about 40,000 pages that says indexed though blocked by robots. When we inspect these, it turns out they are auxiliary pages that are linked to from a main page that we want to rank for. And these URLs, they're either not accessible by users who are not logged in, or they're just kind of thin informational pages. So we did indeed add a disallow for these on robots. And I guess Google must have hit these a while back before we got a chance to disallow them, and because it knows about them. And what's alarming is that console says that they're indexed, right? So I wanted to ask you, does this actually mean that they are? And more importantly, are they counted toward my site's quality? Because when I try to pull them up using a site colon query, I only get about 1 in 5 to show up. So I'm a little confused. If you could shed some light on that message, please.
Yeah. So I would see that mostly as something of a warning for a situation where you're not aware of what's happening. So if you're certain that these should be blocked by robots text, then like that's pretty much fine. But if you weren't aware that they were blocked by robots text and you actually wanted to have them indexed and ranking well, then that's something where you could take action on. So from that point of view, I wouldn't see this as something that's alarming. It's mostly just, well, Google found these pages, and they're blocked by robots text. And by the way, if you care about these pages, you might want to take some action. If you don't care about them, like just leave them the way they are. And it's not going to count against your website. It can happen that they appear in the search results, but usually that's only for very artificial queries, like a site query. And the main reason it's mostly those kind of queries is because for all of your normal queries that are going to your pages, you almost certainly have reasonable content that is actually indexable and crawlable, and that will rank instead. So if we have the choice between a roboted page that we don't know about, kind of what's on there, and a reasonable page on your website, and that reasonable page has those keywords on it, then we'll just show your normal pages. So from that point of view, it's probably extremely rare that they would show up in search, and it's more a warning in case you weren't aware that these pages were blocked.
OK. Yeah, our main concern is more about them reflecting on the quality of our website. So if you're saying that it doesn't, I guess no harm.
No. Yeah,
does Google?
That's perfectly fine. Like
Okay.
I think what you could do, if you wanted to make sure, look in the performance report in Search Console and see what kind of queries they show up for. And if you can't find any, then it's like, well, we're not showing them for any queries that you care about. So it's not that we're going to take them into account for that kind of query.
OK. While I'm here, a question about one of those URLs in robots is not really accessible to the bot because it's behind authentication. So you have to be a logged in user. Is there a preference for Googlebot on those types of pages on the status code? Because I think the convention is kind of like, I've seen a lot of 302s to a login page. Google, I assume, pretty quickly figures out that something, it doesn't need to be like a 401 unauthorized or something like that, right? Or...
No, that's usually fine. If it's blocked by robots text, we don't see the status code anyway. So
OK.
From that point of view, we wouldn't see it. The one situation where I would look into login pages a little bit more is if your primary content is behind a login page and you want to have at least that login placeholder kind of appearing in the search results. So we have that, for example, with Search Console. I don't know, happen to see that more often there. A lot of the tools are essentially behind a login. And if you search for one of those tool names, we know it's behind this URL, but we can't find any content there. So we kind of need to at least be able to index some kind of a templated login page for that query. But if in your case this is actual content that's not meant to be findable in search anyway, then it doesn't matter.
OK, perfect. And sorry, one more quick one. No indexing pages. So I've heard you say in past office hours that for a large site, processing a lot of pages that are now no indexed could take up to a month or so. And we've had to do that in order to address some site quality issues. And as we monitor console, is it normal to see the index pages kind of gradually decline? I guess that would be my guess as they're crawled. Or is it more like one day there's a sharp drop off?
Usually it's a gradual decline.
Okay.
So Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the normal crawling and indexing process. We sometimes, when we recognize large site-wide changes, we will crawl a little bit faster. So it won't be
Oh,
as
okay.
slow as of a decline, but it's still a gradual decline.
Hmm. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Thank you so much.
Cool, thanks. Brandon.
Hey, John. So I'm gonna set the stage with some context. And this is actually relevant to the no index discussion. So let's say you consider a site with 100 million pages, and there may be 10 million pages that we believe are low quality. Maybe 5 million of those are actually indexed. And let's suppose that we want to add a no index tag to these 10 million, as well as reduce the amount of internal links that they receive. So over a hypothetical 4 months, let's say Google crawls and removes 2 million from the index, while the other 3 million remain. And maybe a few months down the road, we determine that a few 100,000 are actually of decent quality, and we want to reinstate them, essentially. So we remove the no index tag and we start adding meaningful internal links back. Do you foresee or think the history here of being indexed and applying a no index tag and then trying to get it indexed again at a later time would be detrimental? Would Google be reluctant to crawl these URLs again, knowing that they previously were no indexed? And do you think that there would be any issues with getting them indexed again after they were crawled?
I think like in the long run, there definitely wouldn't be any kind of long-term effect from that. I think what you might see initially is that if we've seen a no index for a longer period of time, that we might not crawl that URL as frequently as otherwise. But if you're saying this is kind of in the process of we added a no index, it dropped out, and then we changed our mind, we added or we removed it again, then that's not going to be like a long-term no index situation. That's probably going to be something where we still crawl that URL with the kind of the normal crawl rate anyway. And when you're talking about millions of pages, we have to spread that out anyway. So that's something where you'll probably see, I don't know, depending on these pages, I would imagine you might see, I don't know, every couple of weeks or every month or so, you might see us try to crawl those pages individually. So I don't see that kind of crawl rate dropping off to completely zero. Maybe it'll go from 1 month to 2 months if we see a no index for a longer period of time, but I don't see it going completely to zero. So that kind of like we added no index and we changed our mind at some point later on. Usually that's perfectly fine. And this is especially the case if you're working on internal linking at the same time, where you add more internal links to those pages, then of course we're going to crawl those pages a little bit more because we see like, oh, it's like freshly linked from this and this place within your website. Therefore, maybe there's something we actually do need to index.
Gotcha. Do you think it might actually be better to reinstate these URLs under a different URL? So that way there is none of that historical context and potentially the likelihood that it gets crawled would be higher? Because it seems like if over the long run, let's say after 6 months, Google knows, oh, this URL, we no indexed it before, that it may be less likely to crawl that URL despite increased internal linking, as opposed to a brand new URL that has the same amount of internal links.
I don't think you would see a noticeable difference. No.
Okay.
I mean, at least from my point of view, it's not something where I would spend a lot of time trying to figure that level out, because if you're talking about a really small website where kind of one page index is a significant portion of the web page, then that kind of optimization, I think, makes sense. But if you're talking about a website with millions of pages, then I think any optimization you do there is such a small level that you actually can't measure it.
I see.
So,
And when it comes to the no indexing of content, that should we anticipate that impacting the overall assessment of the site, where if the majority of the content actually is low quality, that accelerating its de-indexing might fast track us to improve our site quality in the eyes of Google. Does that sound about right?
sometimes, yeah. Sometimes that can help. I think with a large website, it sometimes makes sense to make bigger changes like this. But I think the thing to keep in mind is that our quality evaluations, they tend to take quite a bit of time. So if you go off and just de-index, I don't know, 10% of your website, then it's not going to be the case that like next week we will pick that up and reevaluate the quality of your website overall, but rather we need to do that over time. And that's something that'll take a couple of months anyway. With regards to just removing a lot of content or not, I think that's something that depends quite a bit on the website itself. And oftentimes, just removing content doesn't make the website's quality overall much better. It's more like, well, you're removing some of the bad stuff, but essentially the whole framework for kind of being seen as a low-quality website, that's still kind of there. So you need to take care of that part as well. So it's not just blindly removing things, but actually you kind of need to make sure that the rest also levels up a little bit in terms of quality.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the thorough responses. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks. Gregory.
Yeah. Hey, John. I've been working with a client for like 2 months now, and I found in my research that they were cloaking internal links.
OK.
Yeah. But then I checked in with the Wayback Machine, and I found out they have been doing this for they made a certain template change, and it's about footer links, and these footer links were there back in January. But when I check Search Console, I don't really see anything happening with a penalty as such. So I wonder how long does it take? Because I want to advise them, of course, hey, you need to take action before you get a penalty. But I can imagine the response, hey, we've been doing this for apparently 9 months. Should we be afraid?
Yeah. So what kind of cloaking do you mean, or what are they doing?
Display is not on a with CSS.
OK.
And there's no way to make these links appear with a link or such.
Yeah. I think it's something where theoretically we don't like that, but I don't see the web spam team taking action on that. Because especially when it comes to internal linking like that, it's something that has quite a subtle effect within the website, and you're essentially just shuffling things around within your own website. I think it would be trickier if they were, I don't know, buying links somewhere else and then hiding them. That would be problematic. That might be something that our algorithms pick up on, or that even the web spam team at some point might manually look at. But if it's within the same website, if it's set to display none, then I don't think it's a great practice. If you think it's an important link, then kind of like make it visible to people. But
Yeah.
It's not going to be something where the web spam team is going to take action and remove the site or do anything crazy with that.
Okay, so in this case, you would say leave it as it is.
Well, I wouldn't leave it as it is. I would see it as something to try to improve for the long run, in the sense of, like, if you think this is an important link to an important page, then it's like, just like be straightforward about it.
Yeah.
Because users are going to use it too. Or maybe if users don't care about it, maybe it isn't actually an important link. But I wouldn't see it as something where it, like, drop everything, we need to fix this week kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Clear. Thank you.
Cool. OK. Let me go through some of the submitted questions, and then I'll get back to all of you with your raised hands as well. Submitted questions are always useful along the way as well, because not everyone can join these sessions live. Let's see. The first one I have here is a longer question about product pages. And I'll just try to paraphrase it a little bit. There are two aspects there. On the one hand, they have kind of promotional products where they have samples, essentially, that are also shown. So individual companies who are using these promotional products. And the other part is that some of these are shown behind a View More button. And I took a look at the example and at the website a little bit to try to figure out, like, what is actually happening there. And one of the things that I see there is, so I think a part of the question is, like, well, how do we get all of these sample pages indexed as well? And the thing there, I think, is it's probably not necessary to get all of these sample pages indexed, because essentially these samples are promotional material for other companies. And it's not that you need to have those pages indexed so that your page is findable, because essentially those pages would be findable for some other person's company plus folder or plus cups or whatever. And from that point of view, it's not that these are pages that would be driving traffic to your website, because nobody would be looking for, I don't know, some other company plus folder and hope to find your website. They probably want to find that other website or that other business name directly. So from that point of view, I wouldn't focus on these pages as being critical for your website. Obviously, there might be individual situations where it does make sense to have those indexable and findable, but at least the ones that I looked at seemed like the kind of pages where you don't really need to worry about them too much. The other part is the JavaScript View More button that you have on some of these pages with kind of collections that you're showing there too. I took a quick look at how you have this implemented, and essentially you load a small subset of your collection, and then the JavaScript View More button would load more of these items onto the page. And Googlebot doesn't use View More buttons, so we would not be able to see kind of the additional content that you're loading there. So instead of using View More, usually we recommend using some form of pagination. In our e-commerce stocks, which we just published this week, we have, I think, a whole article on pagination. So I will take a look at that to see what kind of makes sense in your specific case. And like I mentioned for the first part, maybe it's also something where you don't actually need to worry about this too much, because those pages are not critical for your site's traffic. Let's see. Official movie sites we oversee were recently redesigned. Some content was just reorganized, but the new site is a better user experience. The ranking dropped afterwards. Reverting the sites brought back the ranking. We concluded that no JavaScript technical issues. This started just after the June spam updates. Same findings for multiple movies and domains. Could the new sites be getting hit by a spam penalty and not the old site? We can provide some examples. I mean, it's possible that you're doing something spammy on the new sites, or something our systems pick up as being spammy, but I doubt that this is the case. Usually, when you do a bigger reorg of a website, you do see some fluctuations. So especially in the short term, you will see things kind of shuffle around a little bit until they settle down again. So those kind of fluctuations, I think, are kind of expected. And the kind of longer-term changes, it's something where it almost depends a little bit more on what you're actually doing on the site. And I think you're here, Andrew.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm
Yeah.
here. And so yeah, this issue has been happening, since the June issue updates, and we reverted back a few sites a few weeks afterwards. But the current site we're looking at has been that case for since the June update, and before the June update, it was active since December of last year. Constant top 5 ranks, and then site redesign, ranks dropped, and they've been dropped ever since. And we know, based on the experience of the other domains, if we would revert back the site, they'll just pop right back in place. So
Yeah.
there's something going on with the new template, and it's really, these movie sites are really just the homepage. We have sub pages, but the synopsis page and even the gallery page, those have been moved to the homepage, and that's really the only change.
Yeah. I wouldn't expect the spam update to have any effect there, because usually the type of spam that we pick up is more along the lines of like really bad spammy content or really bad spammy linking. And if you have a site and you do a redesign, even if it's seen as like, oh, it's like maybe there's keyword stuffing here or something like that, then that's not something that these kind of spammy updates would be looking for.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
to me, it sounds a little bit more like maybe just like the on-site setup of those new pages is, I don't know, not the way that we can process them as easily as the other ones.
No, they're almost the same. Like, I mean, I can look at the Google Search Console render, and it sees the content all as is. It should be. Google's, the HTML it outputs from Google Console is there.
Mhm.
So and the render looks great. So it's we have no idea why this is happening, and the spam is the only reason, because it really happened at those spam updates. Like, the tool we use for ranking, gives us little footnotes, and all the 5 sites we review all fell in line with that update.
Yeah.
And like the only reason why we're thinking the spam is just because this site hosts very similar content to a lot of other sites. The synopsis content is pretty much boilerplate across other entertainment sites across the industry. But we're dealing with the official site, so we're trying to figure out why this is happening.
Yeah. If you can drop some examples in the chat, I can take a look at that afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like the one thing that I could imagine that maybe our algorithms are running into is we see a lot of sites that essentially offer, I don't know, illegal downloads of movie content or things like that. And it might be that combination of lots of movie content and maybe a different template is throwing us off in that direction when we're like, oh, is this actually the official site or not?
Yeah,
But
the odd thing about that aspect is that we lost ranks for like the core movie site ranks. Just the movie name and just some simpler variations, but we actually retain all those piracy ranks. So it doesn't make any sense why this is
okay.
happening, and and yeah, if we revert the site, we know we'll come back. So I'll throw a few examples in there that you can take a look at.
Okay, cool. I'll pass them on to the team to kind of double check. Cool, thanks. Okay, then what can you say about the effect of question-oriented titles, such as what, how, which, and who are in the content in terms of being comparable with semantic search engine? I don't know exactly what direction you're headed with this question, so it's hard to say. In general, I would recommend focusing on things like keyword research to try to understand what people are actually searching for. And if you want to match that one-to-one, then that's kind of up to you. I always find it a little bit risky to try to match these queries one-to-one, because those queries can change fairly quickly. So that's something where I wouldn't focus so much on, well, Google is understanding this content right away, therefore it's good, but more thinking about like what is a long-term thing that you want to achieve with your pages, and how do you want them to show up in search. And sometimes that means having some question and answer content, but not always. How does Google evaluate interactive content, like a quiz or questionnaire that helps users figure out which product or thing that they need? Would rankings still be based on the static content that appears on the page? Yes. The ranking essentially is based on the static content on these pages. So if you have something like a full page of questions, then we will essentially rank that page based on those questions. And that means if you have products that are kind of findable after going through those questions, you should also make sure that you have internal linking to those products without needing to go through that questionnaire. So something along the lines of having like a normal category set up on the website, as well as something like, I don't know, a product wizard or whatever you have to help the users make those decisions. I think that's really important. The questionnaire pages can still be useful in search if you recognize that people are searching in a way that they're not sure which particular product matches their needs, and you can kind of address that in the questionnaire, in the text on the questionnaire. Then those questionnaires can also appear in search as well. But it's not the case that Googlebot goes in and tries to fill out a questionnaire and sees what's kind of happening there. Does giving a do-follow link to a trusted authoritative site, is that good for SEO? I think this is something that people used to do way in the beginning, where they would create a spammy website, and on the bottom they'd have a link to Wikipedia and CNN, and then hope that search engines look at that and say, like, oh, this must be a legitimate website. But like I said, people did this way in the beginning, and it was a really kind of traditional spam technique almost. And I don't know if this ever actually worked. So from that point of view, I would say no. This doesn't make any sense. Obviously, if you have good content within your website and part of that references existing other content, then kind of that whole structure, that makes a little bit more sense and means that your website overall is a good thing. But just having a link to some authoritative page, that doesn't change anything from our point of view. I'd like to do basic research regarding what do foreigners Google the most with Taiwanese culture. What are the most relevant keywords with Taiwan on Google search? It would be great if I could generate a ranking list of it. To acquire that information, I could further designate a campaign for certain products. I don't have that information, so I can't give that to you. But essentially, what you're looking for is probably everything around the lines of keyword research. And there's lots of content written up on how to do keyword research. There's some tools from Google that you can use to help you figure that out. There are a lot of third-party tools as well. And I have no insight into what all is involved there, so I can't really help with that. And I definitely can't give you a list of the queries that people in Taiwan do. I was having two languages, like Hindi and English, on the same page, and I was ranking good on Google. But after the December core update, I lost ranking for Hindi keywords mostly. What should I do to get it back? I don't know. So on the one hand, we don't recommend having multiple languages per page because it makes it really hard for us to understand which language is the primary language for this page. So from that point of view, I think that configuration of having, I don't know, Hindi on one side and English on the other side on a single page is something that can be problematic on its own. So I would try to avoid that setup, and instead make pages that are clearly in Hindi and clearly in English. And by having separate pages like that, it's a lot easier for us to say, oh, someone is searching in Hindi for this keyword. Here's a page on the specific topic. Whereas if we can't recognize the language properly, then we might say, well, we have an English page, but the user is searching in Hindi, so we probably shouldn't show it to the user. And if we're not sure about the language of a page, then that's also kind of tricky, especially when there are other comparative pages out there that are clearly in Hindi. So that's kind of the one thing. The other thing is, with regards to core updates, we have a lot of blog posts around core updates, and I would go through those as well. Because if you're seeing this kind of a change happening together with a core update, it might be due to kind of two languages on page, but probably it's more likely due to just general core update changes that we've made. So I would take a look at those blog posts and think about what you might want to do to kind of make sure that your site is still very relevant to modern users. My question is whether it's OK from an SEO perspective to create doorway pages when they actually help users. Take the URL below, for example. This page leads users who have searched for a non-scientific name of a cactus to the original page. Yeah, I don't know about this specific situation. And usually, we would call things doorway pages if they essentially lead to the same funnel afterwards, where essentially you're taking a lot of different keywords and you're guiding people to exactly the same content in the end. In the case of something like an encyclopedia, it's not the same content. It's essentially, I don't know, very, very unique pieces of content on there. And just because it covers a lot of keywords doesn't necessarily mean that it's a doorway page. So without digging into this specific site in detail, my guess is that that would not be considered a doorway page. But a doorway page might be something where, I don't know, if you have a cactus page on your website and you're saying like cactuses in all cities nearby, you make individual city pages where all of the traffic is essentially funneled to the same direction on your website, then that would be considered a doorway page, where you're kind of like creating all of these small doorways, but they lead all to the same house. A question related to classified websites. If I have ad listings on search results, I allow to crawl an index. If I have no ad listings for some time, should I disallow to index, or should I let Google decide? If search results don't have ad listings, and excluding those pages from the sitemap would also be a good practice. So I think, just for sake of clarity, I think the search results that this person means are the search results within their own website. So if someone is searching for a specific kind of content, then the website pulls together all the ads that it knows. And it's those search results, not Google search results. And essentially, the direction here is like what you should do with empty internal search results pages. And our preference is essentially to be able to recognize these empty internal search results pages, which could be by just adding a no index to those pages. That's kind of the ideal situation, because what we want to avoid is to have a page like that in our index where it's basically like saying, oh, someone is searching for a blue car of this model and make, and you have this page on your website, but it says, like, I don't know of any people selling this kind of a car. Then sending people to your website for that kind of a query would be a really bad user experience. So we would try to recognize those pages and say, like, these are either soft 404, and that we recognize they're an empty search results page, or you put a no index on them and you tell us that it's an empty search results page. So essentially, that's kind of the direction to go there. If you can recognize it ahead of time, we would generally prefer having a no index directly from your side. If you can't recognize it ahead of time, then using JavaScript to add a no index might be an option. With regards to sitemap or not, the sitemap file only helps us with additional crawling within a website. It doesn't prevent us from crawling these pages. So removing these pages from the sitemap file would not result in us dropping them from search, and would not result in us recognizing that actually they don't have any content there. So removing something in a sitemap file wouldn't negatively affect the natural crawling and indexing that we do for individual pages. So I think those are kind of the two aspects. If you can recognize it's an empty search results page, put a no index on it. Removing it from a sitemap file is not going to remove it from our index. Let's see. Starting from the 21st of September, a number of our product pages across a few of our sites has been labeled as Soft 404. We made sure that all critical resources and main content are available to the bot and get properly rendered. It seems like we are missing something, as we can't pin down exactly why this is happening. Any suggestions? I would probably need to take a look at some examples. So I don't know if you're here. Oh, you are. Ooh, fantastic.
Hi,
Cool.
John.
Hi.
Pleasure to meet you, first of all.
Yeah. Good to see you.
Could I share with you an URL, maybe?
Yeah, if you can drop them in the chat, I can pick them up afterwards.
In the
it's
chat,
always,
in this chat, right?
yeah. It's always tricky to debug them live, but it sends me a chat log afterwards, and I always go through that for examples.
Yeah, I'll send you a couple of them. It's just that it's been happening since I mentioned my question, right? The 21st of September.
Yeah.
And we just can wrap our head around what's happening, because I use the inspection URL tool in Search Console, and all the main resources or sources are there. So it's difficult to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
We really, yeah, OK. Should I wait for an answer for you?
Usually what happens with these kind of things is I double check them briefly, and then I forward them on to the team so that they can take whatever action that they need to there. If these are really kind of just normal pages and we're recognizing them properly, it sounds like something we have to fix, not something you have to fix.
OK, fantastic. OK, thanks a lot. Really appreciate your help.
Cool. Let's see. Some of these, I think we already looked at. My question is that Google is not indexing websites, even fresh sites, and also not updating data in Search Console. Is there any hidden update going on? I mean, there are always updates going on. So that's kind of hard to say. I don't think there's anything explicitly hidden going on. What I do sometimes see is that because it's so much easier to create websites nowadays, people create websites with a large number of pages, and then they focus more on the technical aspect of getting, I don't know, 1 million pages up, and they disregard a lot of the quality aspects. And then because of the way that Search Console tries to provide more and more information about the indexing process, it's a lot easier to recognize that, well, Google is not actually indexing everything from this website. And then the assumption is often there that, well, perhaps this is a technical issue that I just need to tweak. And usually, it's more of a quality issue, where when we look at the website overall and we're not convinced about the quality of this website, then our systems are not going to take the time to kind of invest in more crawling and indexing of a website. So if you give us 1 million pages and the pages that we end up showing initially don't convince us, then we're not going to spend time to actually get all of those millions of pages indexed. We're going to kind of hold off and keep a small subset. And if over time we see that this subset is doing really well and has all of the signs that we look at with regards to quality, then we will go off and try to crawl more. But just because there are a lot of pages on a website does not mean that we're going to crawl and index a lot of pages from that website. Cool. OK. We still have a bunch of hands raised. Wow, that list is getting longer and longer. I have a bit more time afterwards, so we can continue on as well. But maybe I'll just go through some of these that have their hands raised now. Let's see. I think iTrend Greece.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Vasilis. I am from Greece. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We have a problem with our main site. The DNS for a region are down, and we create another domain, itrendmobile2.gr. itrend.gr now is dead. So, is there a way to say to crawlers that move iTrend SEO to iTrend Mobile GR SEO?
If the DNS for the old domain is not accessible, then we
No,
won't.
it's not accessible. We are ignored right now because of that matter.
Yeah. If we can't access the old site, we can't process a redirect. So we need to be able to see the old site and to see that there's a redirect from the old one to the new one. We can't just process a site move without looking at that.
Okay. One more question. For how much time your bots, if you know, I try to access, let's say, itrend.gr, even if it's dead?
How long? I don't think we have a fixed time. So it depends a little bit on how often we try to crawl. And if like for example, the homepage is something that we will try to crawl every couple of days. And probably that will disappear fairly quickly because we try a lot and we can't get to it. But the lower level pages of the website, maybe we just recrawl them once a month. And then it takes at least that 1 month before we can drop them from the search results.
Okay, and something last. If this court law has two stages, one is short, so you can have an answer, let's say in 20 days, about the restore of the DNS. After that period, is there a way to say Google recrawl the dead, let's say, dead pages?
That happens automatically. So
Okay.
if we see that a website transitions from being broken to being fixed again, we will try to crawl it a lot faster again.
Okay. Let's say an alternative way to call Google about that is a way through, let's say, Google Analytics or Google Webmaster Tools pages.
In Search Console, yes, you can submit them for recrawling as well. But usually, if the website goes from not being accessible at all to accessible again, then we will crawl that anyway. So you can help a little bit, but it's not critical.
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Sure. Thanks. All right, Mert.
Hi, John. Thank
Hi.
you very much for doing this. So basically, I did a small website for my mom's business using a CMS tool called Squarespace. I know that they automatically submit a sitemap once you create a new page. And now we've decided to add like the e-com functionality like about 2 weeks ago. And the site was password protected. So my first question would be if Google penalizes you in a way if the user can't access the page, if it's basically just password protected. And the second would be, the site was basically indexed and shown really nicely, the pages before, but after adding all those products and different pages, I looked it up on Google Search Console for crawling, but basically my mom is giving me a hard time now when these pages are going to be shown again. So I'm kind of looking for answers.
Yeah, I think so there's no penalty for having password protection, but it means that we can't access the content behind the password. Mm-hmm. So probably that is the initial step that happened with regards to kind of turning on almost like an e-commerce site or shop section on your website, we actually have a whole article on that now in our search documentation, specifically for e-commerce sites. So I would take a look at that. There might be some tricks that you missed out on that can help to speed things up there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. That's it.
Cool. Fantastic. Let's see, Nisha.
Yeah, hi, John.
Hi.
Thanks for the opportunity. My question is regarding the performance measurement of Google Discover. So basically, I have a client whose site is up for I think 7 or 8 years, and they have a great content over their website. And what I am seeing is for a particular day and for a particular page, if Search Console is showing you, let's say, 100 clicks, and if you check that particular page and particular date on analytics, so it shows you the discrepancy in the sessions and the clicks. So there it is showing around 20 sessions, I mean, in analytics. So there is a lot discrepancy I saw. So what is the good way to measure the Google Discover performance?
I think the only way to measure it is in Search Console. Because in particular in analytics, the traffic from Discover is almost always folded into Google Search. And then you can't separate that out. So it's only in Search Console do you see kind of the bigger picture.
All right. Okay, so there is another question. If if we should look at Search Console basically, as you say, but if we are going to, a lot of people say this traffic goes to the direct channel medium. So I mean, why is that? Is there any particular reason for that?
I don't know. I think it's something that the product team just decided to do it like that in the beginning. So in particular, Discover we see as a part of Google Search, so we don't separate it out. And in analytics, it might be that I don't know exactly how they would even track that there, in which category. But at least the Discover team, they basically decided, well, Discover is a part of search, so we're not going to separate it out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Amos.
Hey, John. Good morning. Yes, I had a question in regards to internal search pages. So we're allowing indexation of on-site searches. So when someone does a search on our site, we create a page for that. And now that's gone out a bit of control. So we have hundreds of millions of these pages. So how would you recommend we sort that out? And if there is actually any benefit to cleaning that up, or if we shouldn't worry about it?
I think for the most part, it does make sense to clean that up because it makes crawling a lot harder. So that's kind of the I don't know, the direction I would look at there is to think about like which pages you actually do want to have crawled and indexed, and to help our systems to focus on that. Not so much that like you should get rid of all internal search pages. Some of these might be perfectly fine to show in search. But really try to avoid the situation where anyone can just go off and create 1 million new pages on your website by linking to random URLs or words that you might have on your pages. So to kind of take it and say, well, you have control of which pages you want to have crawled and indexed, rather than like whatever randomly happens on the internet.
And for those pages then that, so we control this, and the pages then aren't any longer linked, they're kind of these orphan URLs, but they're still going to be crawled and probably indexed. What do we do with them? Do we for them, index them, or?
I mean, if they're still usable by users, I would keep them accessible, but I might add a no index to them. So one thing you could do is create a list of search queries where you think we have reasonable content, and just double check that list. And if it's on the list, then like let it be indexed. If it's not on the list, then add a no index to those pages. So something along those lines. And finding out which of these pages are actually reasonable is sometimes a bit tricky, because it's easy to take simple metrics and just say, oh, I'll just take the top 10% pages from traffic. But I don't know if those are actually the good pages. Like if you would create category pages for those, are those the ones that you would pick or not?
And it's continually changing too. So
yeah,
you might get pages that suddenly have demands and then don't have demands. So it's a tricky thing to manage. Is there any kind of benefit then, do you think, longer term? So if we do this cleanup, obviously the business would argue, you know, if we're going to do this work, it's investment from our side. What is the return on this? Is there an SEO benefit to that?
So on the one hand, you have the crawling side, which will be affected. So if we go off and don't have to crawl all of those pages, then we can focus more on the actual content you do care about. And especially with an e-commerce site, you have things like price changes all the time. And if we can't pick up the price changes quickly enough, then that's kind of a bad thing. Whereas if we can concentrate our crawling more on the content that you do want us to care about, then that helps to kind of like improve those pages. So it's not so much that there's an immediate ranking boost for your website overall. If you take care of that, it's more, well, you're focusing the energy a little bit better. The other aspect that sometimes plays a role is that these pages might be seen as being low-quality pages, or almost like doorway pages, and that you just have different variations of the same keywords over and over again. And that is something that could pull down the overall quality of a website. But it really depends on the specific situation. And it's not the case that you can say, well, I'll clean up my internal search results, and then Google will think my website is suddenly significantly higher quality. It can be like a small change, and sometimes a small change is relatively large for a website. But I wouldn't rely on that aspect. I would really focus more on the crawling aspect.
Great, thanks. One final question is, so these pages are linked from the footer of the site across most of the pages of the site. And is there in Google's eyes, is there any benefit to have these links in the navigation, so they're more seen from a kind of a user's benefit to navigate through the site than having them kind of in the footer?
I think there might be a subtle difference, but I don't think you'd see a measurable change in that, because we do try to figure out what the primary content is of a page and focus on that. But it's not that we will ignore everything that is out of that area. So I think that's something where like you can work on that to make the site's UX better overall. But I don't think you'd see an immediate change in SEO from changing, kind of like moving links from the footer to the primary content.
OK, thanks.
Sure. OK, let me take a break here with regards to the recording so that we have a reasonably long session. And thank you all for all of your questions so far. It's been great having you all here. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you're, of course, welcome to join these sessions live, or at least drop your questions as well into the community section in YouTube, where we always have the next ones lined up. And with that, let me pause here.